Layovers, your weekly dose of aviation innovation.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard from the flight deck. This is Paul Dimitri, and this is Alex Hunter. We'll be the pilots for this podcast about the news, the startups, and the technologies defining the modern air travel experience. Our flight time today, 1 hour and 30 minutes, and we expect an on-time arrival. Coming up on this flight, the power of data to fly faster, the power of data to book better by ITA Matrix, the power of sensors for better airports, but also Ryanair wants to offer transatlantic flights for £10 British, a personal device battery creates a fire in a KLM flight, a look at why all those strikes at Lufthansa, and we look at the world of mistake fears. As we reach our cruising altitude, I'm going to turn off the fasten seatbelt sign for you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and let's turn on those noise-canceling headphones.
This is Flight 008 to Singapore. Hi, Alex.
Singapore. Good evening. We're doing this in the evening for a change.
Yeah, well, I cannot see the difference from your
I
background.
know, that could be the middle of the night. Could be 6 o'clock in the morning.
For those who listened to the show last week, we introduced a small indent, so small music and track at the beginning and at the end of the show. I hope you liked it. We're just, again, trying and shipping as we go. We're going to make some improvement there, but I hope you had fun with it. It was a bit of a special episode.
We did get some good feedback. Somebody sent me a text message right after listening to it saying, you guys really cranked up the production on 007. I was like, yeah, I think Paul had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun. Too much time though, but that was a lot of fun. I'm learning a lot. I mean, we are really learning a lot by doing this show. So.
On every facet, not just the sound, and so many people have been so helpful. John Biggs, to giving us some feedback, and the sound has I think improved exponentially since the very beginning. But also on where people are finding us, how they're listening to us, the types of thing they're interested in, everything like that. It's been a steep but fascinating learning curve.
Yeah, and we're still learning. So, thank you, every one of you who've done feedback. We've really gotten a lot, and it's really useful for us to improve. Because otherwise, we're really living in a box. I mean, we're talking to ourselves.
Yeah,
basically.
You're just listening into a conversation we'd already be having anyway.
Exactly. So news of the week. First, a white elephant, a ghost airport. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this is, I'm sure a lot of you have heard, maybe not specifically of this story, but about this airport, which is in Valencia in Spain, and it was built in 2011. It's called Castellón Costa. It was built in 2011 for 150 million euros, and this was, I think, is the classic definition of a boondoggle, launched without a single airline committed to fly to or from there. Not only that, so it hasn't ever hosted a commercial flight. In 2012, a large section of the runway had to be torn up because the measurements were wrong.
My God.
So planes couldn't actually physically make the turns that were being requested of them. And we're not talking about laying a road here. A runway is an extraordinarily complex piece of engineering and not cheap. And then in 2013, it was revealed that if a plane landed there, it couldn't get fuel because the fuel stations had never been built. So finally, they got an operating certificate last year, and they did a bunch of tests to check the measurements had been done properly, and all of the flight control and radio comms systems. But still, no one was going to go to this airport. And then finally, late last week, Ryanair thought, and this is so typical of Ryanair, like, blue light sale, we're going to go in and get this thing dirt cheap. Ryanair are introducing service to this airport that's been a ghost town for nearly 4 years. And they're going to do London Stansted on their winter schedule, 2015. And they're going to do it for something like under £20.
Oh, wow. That's really cheap.
So it's great, but it's so it's ridiculous.
I've read a little bit about this airport. It seems that this birth was really like a folly from the local mayor, whoever he was, councillor, governor, or something, that really wanted to create an airport. I don't know. I don't have the full details, but it really looks like somebody's great plans, and there's even like a statue in front of it,
a beautiful statue too.
That has cost like I think 300,000 euros, and for an airport that is nobody uses. And but this guy, Fabra is his last name, is in jail for tax fraud. So that tells you a bit more.
I didn't know that. That's just like this whole story in a nutshell.
Apparently, the airport is a bit in the middle of nowhere. They were hoping at some point that the airport would gather a train stop. There's a high-speed train that goes from I don't remember exactly and they would. I think they were thinking about getting a stop there, but it's a little bit middle of nowhere.
It really is.
But it reminded me of another story, because when you submitted that piece of news, we have this Excel spreadsheet where we share stuff, the news that we want to talk about in the podcast. I remembered an episode of Top Gear. It was season 20, episode 3. Where the three blokes there were running fast cars on an abandoned runway in an abandoned airport in Spain, and I assumed that would be the same, and actually it's not. Actually, there's another airport that is another airport that is abandoned. It's called Ciudad Real Central Airport. It's not very far from Madrid, depending on what you call not very far from Madrid, anyway. And it has apparently cost. This one, 1 billion.
Oh my God.
It has had some operational, so there were flights going there. Actually, and Ryanair flew from Stansted to that other airport for 6 months in 2010 and then abandoned. Then Vueling stopped in 2011. Since then, I think there's like no one there, and they're looking for a buyer. So if you're interested to buy a
maybe we should have a
layovers
airport that we all hang out at.
Yeah.
Record the podcast. This whole thing, and the Spanish media really jumped on this and said this type of thing is why we had such a rotten time economically. And the airport, I love this little nugget. The airport was after some investigation found to have spent 26 million euros sponsoring local sports teams.
This is why it comes back to that story of administration or somebody really wanted to make an airport not of any economical sense, but just because it's
absolutely they announced it was open shortly before regional elections. I think that says so much, right there. But I'm glad it's getting some life. It's weird and unsettling to see an airport abandoned like that. I hope that they can make a go of it, and it's a nice part of Spain. So
yeah, it is, and I hope that this time Ryanair commits for more than 6 months, like the other airport. But keeping on Ryanair, another piece of news at Ryanair: they actually finally going to do these transatlantic flights. Apparently,
yes.
Right?
Yesterday, their board approved this plan to finally offer Ryanair type services. It's unclear whether or not it will be under the Ryanair brand or not, but they're looking at offering transatlantic services not before 2020. I hasten to add. But they are looking to add that type of service for between $10 and $15 each way. Now, I'm sure there are because they're flying to the U.S. They have to have a certain percentage of seats available at that price. So there will be if they actually commit to it. But their board, and this is a public company, have committed to that, and their stock tanked as a result of this.
Oh wow! I didn't know
it's a volatile stock. It's a healthy stock, but it's a volatile stock. But it's going to happen, and I think it's great. It's putting more pressure on the legacy carriers, who I'm sure will do everything that they can to fight this in the courts, because that's what they do. But it's fantastic, and this isn't just sort of one city to one city. They, when pressed, said that their ambition is to have service between 12 to 14 cities in Europe and 12 to 14 cities in the US. That's not small.
No, it is not. That's a lot of ghost airports. No, I'm sorry, that was a cheap one. But the reason I said when introducing this piece of news finally is that I remember that in 2008, so 7 years ago, that was when they first said they wanted to do transatlantic flights. Back then, they had said, okay, inflation has gone through, but back then they were saying £8 for a ticket. Now they gained 10. But it's this time at least they're more realistic in saying it's going to happen within the next 5 years.
Yeah,
It's not like we're starting tomorrow. It's like we're looking at a plan. I think the first thing they have to do is negotiate like a good deal with either Boeing or Airbus.
Yeah, I think that they'll probably stick with 737s with whatever, the new versions of the 737. But yeah, they've looked at how many people have tried to break into that transatlantic market and how long it's taken them to deal with every layer of US bureaucracy and EU bureaucracy.
Come on, let's be honest. The Atlantic is littered with failed attempts.
Yeah, through the decades. I mean,
yeah, there've been Skytrain,
Laker.
Laker. There'd be Zoom Airlines. I think it was like a decade ago. There was, I think from Switzerland, because I took it there was one called Swiss World Airways. We're doing a Geneva, New York, which also failed. There was a Norwegian, obviously. We talk about a lot about Norwegian. They did it for a small amount of time. It was not £10, right?
No.
It was more but they lost their license. I mean, their license is suspended.
They're getting messed around. They're getting messed around. And to kind of to cast the boring sense of reality here, the 10 to 15 pound stuff, that'll be the promo stuff they give away. What they're looking at, I think, is around £99 one way, which still transatlantic is a heck of a deal.
No, it is. I mean, you mentioned in episode 006, WOW Airlines. They do a stopover in Iceland, but that was £99, I think. So it's I mean, I believe that if anyone can do it, probably Ryanair are the ones to succeed there.
Yes, they have the experience. They've got the economics behind them. They've got the pure operational wherewithal to deal with it. So
yeah, because compared to all the failed attempts were mostly startups, meaning that there were people that might have experience in the airline industry, but they were like not having a huge company to back them up.
Well, exactly.
Even though if they go with that, probably they will go with a second different company. Maybe they'll keep the same brand or not. We're not sure, but they have the experience and actual experience in low-cost airlines for like a long, long time. So they might actually crack that nut. Talking about which, you've seen that they're abandoning their yellow color. I mean, they're toning it down.
Yeah, they're doing this sort of, not rebrand, that's not the right word, but they're kind of moving the whole identity.
Yeah, they're moving away a little bit from that really bright yellow that if you've ever guys taken a Ryanair flight is all over the place, or the bluish, which is already part of the brand, where like they really go, and it's less aggressive. I don't know if that's the right term.
Definitely.
Blue. It's more like, so it's interesting. I mean, it's really, I mean, we both Alex and I have been saying that in a few episodes, is, they're really trying to push the brand a little bit, not higher, I don't know if that's the right term, but they're looking at differentiation in products, they're looking at introducing classes, et cetera, et cetera.
I think they've seen how well it's worked with EasyJet, elevating themselves above that noise, and they want a piece of it. I mean, they're nobody's fool, those guys. They know exactly what they're doing.
Now, just to mention about you low cost, I mean, you found an amazing, crazily price to go from, I think it was London to Tokyo via Alitalia. The reason I mentioned that is that not only low-cost airlines are going to deals, but apparently even like traditional airlines. That was amazing. How much was the price you found?
It was something like £240.
Talk about a deal.
Round trip, London, Tokyo via Milan. And I think I found it. I'll tell you exactly how I found it. I signed up to Kayak's flight alerts, which was basically tell me when anything interesting comes up. It was very open-ended. Yeah, £292 and 31p to go London to Narita, return, all taxes and fees included. It's a good time to be flying. It's a very good time. And irrespective of where you're on the spectrum of sort of quality, if it's okay to use that word. I mean, I'm flying to Hong Kong and Singapore round trip on a very good airline, Cathay, for less than £500, which is 2 years ago not going to happen. Not going to happen.
Yeah, not going to happen.
So it's a good time. Oil prices, I don't care what anybody says, they are affecting the ticket prices. So hooray for the traveler.
I just want to mention, because we were talking about extremely low prices, when Cebu Pacific in the Philippines, an airline based in the Philippines, they introduced their long haul, and we're talking long haul, it's more than 9 hours from Manila to was it Abu Dhabi, I think, or Dubai to Dubai. Their launch price was $4 per ticket.
Jeez. They're still around.
Okay, you still have to pay $60 on charges, but it was $4, and it was a promo price. That's exactly what you said earlier. Usually, they push, and they cram a lot of seats in the plane. I think I wrote a blog post back then about the number of seats they were able to cram in a single plane. But I mean, it's a good time to fly, especially for deals. I'm not saying that the quality and or comfort is always there, but for deals, it's great.
Yeah.
Talking about expanding the scope of an airline, so airlines are either expanding upscale. So we just mentioned Ryanair. Ryanair is even thinking about introducing a second class, maybe in another brand, but we'll see that in the future. Some other are expanding in a different way, and Qatar Airways is a good example.
Yeah, Qatar Airways just bought the Sheraton Skyline Hotel at Heathrow.
Oh, wow.
I think anybody who's ever traveled out of Heathrow at an antisocial hour of the day has stayed at this hotel. It's a good hotel. It's a nice hotel. If you're an SPG, Starward Preferred Guest collector, I can guarantee you that you stayed at this hotel. In isolation, it's a fairly mundane story, but when looked in the context of Qatar Airways' activity around Heathrow, it's starting to get very, very interesting. So if you recall, the Qatari government and or Qatar Airways already own 20% of Heathrow Airport, the entire airport. And they also bought, as we mentioned in one of our earlier episodes, 9.99% of IAG, which owns British Airways, which also happens to have the most slots at Heathrow. So they obviously see Heathrow as the absolutely critical component of their...
That's a nexus for them.
Exactly,
seems,
their long-term strategy, and they're investing accordingly. So I think London in general, because Qatar as a government and an investment vehicle have invested heavily in London as well. So I think this is very interesting, and I think we might see more, if not direct Qatar Airways operations, airlines or properties owned by them doing a lot more work in London, which is only positive for the city and the airport.
Yeah, it's true. It's they actually already own an airport. I think an airport. Sorry for my lapse. An hotel.
They probably own an airport too.
Maybe actually, yeah, that's part of the next story. Actually, they So, but it's not the first time. There's not that many airlines who own hotels. But if you look back at the 70s, it was something that started to be done. United had bought hotels in New York. American as well had bought, I think it was also on the East Coast, and in Europe, KLM, Swiss Air, in Asia, Japan Airlines, they all expanded the hotels. But they all went. They went. I mean, they cut back afterwards. They went back to their core business for many reasons. But I don't know do you think it's a sign of a trend that other airlines will try to expand this, or is it just because Qatar Airways is flush with cash?
I think if you want to own the whole experience, it's not a bad idea, but I think it's probably that Qatar Airways are flush with cash. But you're right. I mean, there is huge amounts of precedence for this type of thing. And there was brand types. Remember Radisson SAS hotels?
Oh, yeah, correct. Yeah.
In Scandinavia.
Yeah.
And so I think, it's a natural tie-in, isn't it? If any hotel property surrounding you extend the experience, you make it part of the booking flow for an airline ticket. I don't know if the economics stack up. It seems to suggest that unless you're going to go hardcore for the entire airport experience like these guys are, that it may not work. But I don't know what they're... Okay, tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get someone from Qatar Airways as a guest on this podcast and go, so what are you doing?
Yeah, but we should totally do that. They are interesting. Actually, they are currently, if at the time of recording, if you just go on Twitter or other social network and look for the hashtag Aviation15, there's currently a U.S. Chamber of Commerce conference with a lot of the airlines, including the Middle Eastern airlines there. And there was a piece of news about, I mean, since that whole debate, we've been having the saga about, the U.S. versus the Gulf Airlines. This strategy of expansion by Qatar is one that is also worrisome for because they said in the same breath of buying this hotel at Heathrow that they were looking into properties in the U.S. as well, in North America. So we'll see where this goes. Talking about the Middle Eastern airlines, I don't know if you've seen that Etihad. So Etihad is one that hasn't really publicly debated a lot about that that report that we mentioned on many episodes, but they're going a lot for advertising. They just named Nicole Kidman as their brand ambassador.
It's a very elegant ad. It's very, very well done. And I think it was interesting that both Delta and Etihad launched new global advertising campaigns in the same week. And Delta's is
Yeah.
also very good. It was done by Wyden Kennedy, who are the global agency of record for people like Nike, Coke. So they went with the big guys, and it's a very. I was actually surprised when I watched the Delta ad. I looked at it and went, "Oh, this is really nice." And at the end, it was like Delta. I was like, "Ugh, really? That's so incongruous. It doesn't make it. It doesn't link up." If it had been something like not even a travel brand, but just something that was like even a hotel brand or something like that. But yeah, the Etihad is also very, very good as well.
No, they're pushing all. I mean, there's a lot. All these videos on their YouTube channels.
Oh
Because
yeah, absolutely.
it's not the only one that's been there. The other news about Etihad very quickly is that that you remember I said that they were introducing the A380 to JFK from Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
The first flight, was sold out in less than 4 hours.
Wow. And that's the one with the residence suite, right?
Exactly, that amazing room, 3-room, whatever. But the most interesting bit here. So I just mentioned that a lot of the representatives of the airlines are currently in the East Coast of the US for that conference. But Tim Clark, the CEO of Emirates, is actually going to Washington, D.C. this week to actually meet. So, that we mentioned many times that we don't want to repeat ourselves. That report is accusing the Middle Eastern airlines to be the recipient of over $40 billion of subsidies. And we always, both of us said that Emirates was very smart about how they were reacting to all this.
Yeah.
They just actually released I don't know if you want to call it white paper as well, a report, very well crafted about in which they address most of the accusations that's being made. Have you had the time
Yes,
to
I
look
have.
at it?
It was like you say, it was very well put together, very persuasive. They knew that the audience was ultimately the consumer, and they crafted it in not an infographic-y way, but in a bite-size manner that was compelling and interesting and engaging, and a good counterpoint to the same type of thing that the U.S. airlines put together.
Yeah, they really. I mean, they hammer the point that they are an airline which is fundamentally against the practice of airline receiving any type of state subsidies. Though they understand that it may take time for the practice to be eliminated in the whole industry, and then they go on going into, because it's elegant at the same time it's abrasive, obviously, because they take examples of Korean Air getting subsidies, obviously Lufthansa getting subsidies for some pension plans, Austrian Airlines, etc., etc. I mean, I will not go through all the entire report, but I really think it's well done. The number that really stood up there's not too many numbers. It's not as dry as a white paper. It's one I don't want to call it. You're right. It's more consumer oriented. It said the Star Alliance, which is the world's largest airline group. So 13 of the Star Alliance carriers, so it's a half of the members, have received subsidies in state aid totaling more than $6.8 billion. So that's a lot, actually.
It's a brilliant strategic move on their part, because now especially Delta have to look at their partners or anybody of the U.S. airlines and go, you are complicit because you are through association. It's a brilliant political move.
The other part that I really enjoyed, and it comes back to what you, Alex, said many times in that debate, is that basically what Emirates was doing, it was very close to what airlines from Hong Kong and Singapore were doing. And it states at some moment in the report that Dubai corporate model has its origins in a position as an entrepot, which is basically the same type of, they've been influenced. They even followed in the footsteps of what Singapore especially was doing. They even say, let me read that, Singapore's success has provided inspiration for many governments in the Middle East hoping to spur growth. So they're not accusing Singapore, but they're saying, look, we have the same model. We're like almost a free trade port that now is expanding into other types of activities, and we're following the footsteps of other successes, namely Singapore, even though Hong Kong, Taiwan, and others have been doing that. So, and it's really well crafted. It's not accusatory. This is why I liked about this report, and I'm not do not read me as being like overly praising it, but I like the elegance of not being too pushy and being, presenting facts in a good manner. Were there any other parts that stood out for you?
No,
there?
I think you. For me, it's less about the argument and the more of the way that they crafted it. It was. There's no right answer here. Nobody is going to win on fact. It's going to be on politicking, and it's going to be on lobbying, and it's which is kind of uncool in a way. But the way that they did it, the audience that they spoke to, the associates that they invoked by proxy, have made it very difficult for the U.S. airlines to respond. Who have. And this is just going to go on and on and on and on and on and on. But nice.
And they are, I mean, we'll talk about it in other episodes as well. There are nice graphics as well, showing you some states of the industry. For instance, the labor cost per employee, which you see that Emirates, it's cheap, but it's not actually, Dubai is not in the best place. I mean, no. Singapore Airline has less, Malaysia Airlines, Air India, Jet Airways. They have other places in the world that have actually better labor costs. Fuel, again, same story. Singapore has better fuel costs. So it's balanced. So it's I'm sure we'll see the other side answering. And I don't know if you've seen that, because the new ads from that Fair Sky.
Yeah. So both the U.S. airlines and their unions have launched separate campaigns about fairness in the sky or whatever, and they've put together campaign sites and ads, and they're pushing the ads hard in the U.S. And of course, it's the schmaltz that you would expect from a political ad, but it's not going to do them any good, especially when they don't have the support of basically every other airline in the U.S.
You mentioned, sorry, because I forgot to say that the other piece that was staggering, because you mentioned the unions obviously being siding with the U.S. airlines, and of course talking about how the three Gulf airlines are competing apparently unfairly. Emirates receives on average 25,000 new employment applications each month.
Yeah, so it can't be the worst place in the world to work.
Holy cow, I was not thinking that.
Yeah.
Anyway, very quickly in short news to follow up on what we said in episode 4. I don't know if you've seen the flight attendant that was shot over by was she the daughter of the owner of the Korean Air?
Yeah, the daughter of the chairman of Korean Air, who I think we covered this in our first episode, who threw a fit about the way nuts were served to her and kicked the chief.
And the flight attendant is suing the company back from the US. So the flight attendant is suing the company from the US, which has, punitive damages, because that's why she's. But one of the pieces that is interesting is that she says in the summons of the court order, says she was pressured to lie to government investigator to cover up the incident. Mm-hmm. And that looks very bad. Other little piece of news, one just for you, Alex, in the Virgin Atlantic has found profit again. Good for them.
It's a good piece of news for an airline that's stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I'm pleased for them. Their new CEO, Craig Krieger, who came from American Airlines, has done a really good job of making some tough decisions, cutting costs in certain areas, cutting unprofitable routes, doing the whole Delta acquisition thing. And then investing in other areas. They're going to invest 300 million quid in putting Wi-Fi on every airplane and putting a better food in economy, which apparently is already rolled out in some new routes. And I'm flying the Virgin on next week, so I will report back to see if we get the new experience.
Please do. And they also said that they are replacing 50% of their fleet by 2018, which that's a lot.
Excuse me. Yes, it is a lot, and they. Excuse me. A lot of their fleet is getting on a bit. I mean, they got Dreamliners, fair. They've got brand new A330s, which are stunning, but then they have some pretty creaky 747-400s who will be.
Oh, come on! You love the 747.
No, I love them, and I shall be flying one on next week to San Francisco. But they are getting on a bit, and so I know that they're pushing hard for a fleet that reflects their new route map.
Yes. And Richard Branson said, I can't think of a better way to complete our 30th birthday year than with a return to profit.
Yeah, nice. I think that's fair enough.
Going into the innovation news of the week, you know, if you listen to us guys last week, episode 007, I mentioned the report from CITA, the Future is Personal, in which we said that 81%, in which it says, 81% of passengers carry a smartphone nowadays, but only 4.6 of them actually do mobile checking with that same smartphone. But one of the interesting bit of that report was saying that one of the ways that a lot of people were complaining in the airport was wayfinding. You know, the airports were not, again, from that report, investing enough money into wayfinding. So I remember I mentioned in episode 003 that Frankfurt Airport, remember, I have the new app which tells you how much time you'll have to wait for security and also maps you the best way to go from one point A to point B within an airport. That's wayfinding. But all these requires stuff like iBeacons, as we said last week that Miami has installed some. So it's still something that goes on, but that takes some time. Interestingly, though, there's a piece of news here that we both read. It was in The Verge, which is a tech blog. There's this airport in Cincinnati that was able to cut the median. I'm going to read that. The median wait time in its security lines is dropped by a third, going from 13.2 minutes to 8.9 minutes after installing a system that tracks travelers' phone to estimate how much traffic each line has. It's pretty cool.
Amazing. Good for them.
And the good thing is, because good for them, because that airport is struggling a bit, because since Delta left, I mean, I think they really went down in the number of passengers. But the good thing is that it's not, it's something that's being used in shops. I mean, GCP in the US and other shops, instead of iBeacons requires that your phone has one of the latest iPhone, for instance. Yep. But this is it just uses the MAC address. So every phone has a unique identity, which when you're connected, when you have signal or when you're on Wi-Fi, you have a unique address, which cannot be linked back. I mean, it could be, but let's be. It cannot really be linked back to you, Alex, or to me, Paul. But it says I can actually count the number of people, for instance, within a shop here, within an airport, and it allows shops to do flow traffic. They can actually say, okay,
linger time around display, stuff like that. This was supposed to be the future of retail, but it really never manifested itself in the way that I think a lot of people thought it would. This type of application, though, is really interesting and rather clever.
Yeah, I think it's really clever. And apparently, the application, I didn't know that. This type of application already exists in other airports. Brussels, that well,
you were just there. Were you just there and had to stay in a really long queue?
Yeah, because I was going to border control because I'm from the UK, not in the which is not in Schengen, in the EU anyway. Geneva, Dubai, other airports have that, but it's something passive. You don't see it you as a user directly. There's no like signaling on your phone that it has. It's just like the way they use the data to actually make the flow
passive,
better. And I think that's
which is good.
One thing apparently is that in Europe, because there's still some privacy concerns, even though you couldn't really, if you, Alex, were to sign in with your email address in the Wi-Fi system of the airport, then I would have both your MAC address and your email. So that's a profile. Yeah. So that's why European airports, they have apparently, because I haven't seen them, and I will look out for them next time I'm in an airport. They have those who have installed such systems display and actually tell you that they have. So that's the kind of privacy, terms of service
wow.
or something. Talking about the power of data, you had you found a fascinating article.
I hasten to correct you. I did not find this. My father.
Oh, your dad.
Correct,
your dad.
Hi, Dad. Who is an avid listener to this podcast and a career airline guy, focusing on ops. He sends me. Like every time he reads an article that he finds interesting, he forwards it to hey, maybe you could use this on the podcast. So we really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you so much.
This one in particular was really interesting. So 538, who is it's Nate Silver, who has correctly predicted the outcome of every election in the U.S. for years now, including the last two consecutive presidential elections. Thank God. They have this feature or analysis on their site, which is just simply called "Which Flight Will Get You There Fastest?" And they claim to have analyzed 6 million flights to figure out which airports, airlines, and most importantly, which routes are likely to get you between point A and point B the fastest. And what they've the way that they've broken down the output of this is a wonderful interactive map that we'll post a link to on on the show notes, but also a league table, if you will, of airports and airlines based on how much time they're going to add to your scheduled trip. The airports thing is fascinating. The usual offenders are there. Like, it's done in shades of red, depending on how much time. And of course, all three New York airports are the brightest of red, with an average of...
And Chicago, obviously, as well.
Chicago,
very busy.
Gosh, that's poor airport. That's like around the New York airports are adding like 23 minutes to your scheduled journey. Incredibly, this surprised the heck out of me, Los Angeles LAX on departure, only a 2-minute on average addition to your scheduled flight. Really incredible. They also did this with my hometown airport, or one of my 65 hometown airports, San Francisco. Wasn't great. 10 minutes departure, 14 minutes arrival, but they have weather issues there all the time. They also had a league table of the fastest airlines, which is each major airline ranked by the time it shaved off a typical flight relative to other airlines on the same route. This is only 12 months worth of data. And I was delighted to see Virgin America at the top of the league table.
Congrats.
Which is great, but it's, they have a small fleet, not many routes, relatively easy to get that crown. What I was not surprised to see United and American at the bottom by a long stretch. That's just typical. I was very surprised to see Southwest in third to bottom. An airline who prides themselves and whose entire model is based on turnaround time. They're never going to make you late according to this, but they're not going to get you there ahead of schedule. So I guess they're doing their job, I guess.
There's a fascinating part. So there's these infographics, and there's a blog post attached to it when they go into the methodology, how they found these numbers, so the Bureau of Transportation data, et cetera, and the bit about these the routes and the comparison between airlines is fascinating, because they actually, in the methodology, they use something to compare routes, because they say that some airlines are doing padding. So for the same route, one airline is going to announce that it takes, let's say, an hour and 30 minutes. And another airline would tell you it takes an hour and 40 minutes. So obviously, the hour who tells you it's an hour and 40 minutes might never be late, or might be considered, according to the official statistics of what is being late, not late. Whereas the other one, who was trying to get you there really in an hour and 30 minutes and then can be late, it will actually... So they weigh that into calculation. Good. I'll put also the link, because they are amazing stats. You can see that actually, for instance, Virgin America is actually in that the way that statistics is doing actually better in on-time percentage. Virgin America is even better than they actually say they are, if you take into account these way to calculate routes. United is doing worse.
Yeah. So they're really shooting themselves in the foot.
But Frontier, for instance, is doing much better. It's very, very interesting, because that allows for a true comparison. It's true that, for instance, for us leaving, we don't have that data, and I hope somebody comes with it in Europe. But it's true that leaving from Heathrow, some flights, that the flight only takes you, let's say, an hour, but the announced schedule is an hour and 40 minutes, because they know that Heathrow is backed up, etc. So,
and they're looking at block time exactly at Heathrow. Somewhere like Heathrow, it's just a nightmare.
Yeah, so it's I'll put the link, because it's a fascinating thing, and I really hope that somebody does that one day for Europe, or even just for the UK, because that's really, really well done. Anything else you wanted to add about that?
No, other than that, 538's blog is just a wonderful collection of information is beautiful posts. There's just wonderful analysis and just approaching big sets of data from a different angle than you might initially look at it.
And what it made me think about, even though they said only for the US, imagine if we could have this aligned with then a pricing. When you book a flight, you would have all these statistics at the same time. Because, for instance, I was reminded of that, because it's a very bit slightly off airline, but about Uber, there's the University of Cambridge has done an analysis on pricing to say, are Uber, both Uber Black and Uber X, really less expensive than cabs? And they found that, I think it was $35 was a breaker point, so Uber is more expensive for routes below 35, and taxis are less expensive above. But the point is not that. The point was, if you could merge these two things, having a price analysis with the delays, the best route analysis, that would be a heck of an app to get. And maybe and maybe you'd agree with me, the closest guys that could do that is Google, because Google Flights already gives you a lot of information. You remember when you use, I think you said that in a show, that when you look for a flight, it will tell you, oh, on average, this flight has half an hour delay.
And so you if you're booking a tight-ish connection, that data is critical.
So what they introduced this week, I think it was, so we said, I think in 006, an episode of Flight 006, that Google Flight was out of beta, but now they're ramping up slowly some other features, and they made an agreement with Route Happy. It's a company, I'll come to it a little bit because it's an interesting company, but more than just telling you that the plane will be, for instance, 30 minutes late on average, this time they also include some amenities in the flight. So they will tell you, does that aircraft have seat power? Does it have Wi-Fi? What's the average leg room?
Mm-hmm.
This is pretty cool. And Route Happy provides other stuff. It provides the food, if there's fresh food on flight, the seat type, the IFE, the absence or not of IFE. It's pretty cool to have all that in a single. That's what I mean. I don't think all of it, maybe none of this is revolutionary by itself, but having in a single point of entry, Google Flights, being able to have all this data at a single point of entry is pretty cool. Don't you agree?
It is cool. Here's what I find so strange about Google Flights. You're right. They have all this great information about whether you have Wi-Fi, in-seat power, anything like that, but in many, many instances, they still don't tell you the model of the airplane.
Yeah, it's true. It's absolutely true, which is strange because thank you, because you just gave me a great way to introduce the second part of what I wanted to say. It's strange because when you can go on routehappy.com. So routehappy.com started as a reviewing, like a TripAdvisor for flights. I think I rated more than 100 flights. It was a bit cumbersome because you had to rate. No, you had the possibility to rate, like, okay, how was the lounge? How was the arrival to the airport? How was the lounge if you were in the lounge? How were there like power and Wi-Fi in the lounge? Then the aircraft itself, where there are power, seats, everything. If you could rate every single thing, which made it cumbersome and obviously not appealing for the general public, because not somebody like me would take like half an hour to feel all this, but no. So they stopped this, and now they just relate on data and APIs to get all this information. But when you go there, and I took two examples for you, Alex. When you go there, you can have the data, the type of aircraft. So I took, since Singapore is today our destination, London, Heathrow to Singapore, the happiness score. Happiness is, they consider the compute as the best average of all these amenities. The best is, without the price, let's be clear here, is Oman Air. You'd fly A330-300. Yep. You'll have a seat that is 34, and that's economy, 34-inch of leg room. The layout is 242. You have in-flight entertainment. You have power and USB, and you have a good Wi-Fi, though you have to pay for it. There's no information in the food. Then I took for you, because you were so crazy about that flight going to Narita. So I took the one, it has a layover. So I just took the second part of the layover from Rome, Fiumicino to Narita. The happiness factor there is much lower, 6.6, still above 5. There's a 777. 200, so that's not a bad, but only 30-inch of leg room. The layout 343. There's no power, there's no Wi-Fi, but there's in-flight entertainment. So, I mean, they have the aircraft there, so I don't understand why it doesn't appear on Google Flight.
Strange. It's strange. I think that type of stuff is fantastic, but it comes back to an argument that not even an argument, because I think we both agree on it, that we've had over and over again. That type of information for actually decision making is only applicable to such a small percentage of average people buying a flight, that I understand why they don't put in the model of what type of 737 is it. Because
plus, come on, even you and me. I mean, if you have a choice between a flight that is 270 to Narita and the other one is 600, you better still stick the 270, even though maybe the happiness factor.
No, you're right. I think that's true. Having flown Oman Air, I will also.
I've never done it,
but so I've flown them many times, and they're fantastic. I was very impressed. Brand new airplanes, great IFE. The business class is outstanding.
So, guys, if you want to test routehappy.com, you can
great
go.
Site. Such a good idea.
you can also simply, or if you already booked a flight, you can also only check you put your airline in the flight number, and they will tell you what you'll have. That's
cool.
pretty well done. It's pretty well done. Still talking about the experience, the passenger experience. We mentioned last week Apple Watch was our app of the week. Was not an app, it was a gadget of the week. We mentioned that JetBlue was introducing Apple Pay, both via your iPhone and or your future Apple Watch. I mean, Alex will have an Apple Watch for sure, so you'll be able to pay at JetBlue stuff, like is a glass of red wine, for instance. Hint, hint. The interesting thing I just wanted to mention quickly, because I know otherwise it'll take too much time, but there was an article I read on our Airline Trends, which is a pretty cool website if you want to read about technology and the passenger experience, that reminded me of my experience when I was living in Japan. That though we're very excited about the use of Apple Pay and the Apple Watch and other stuff like that, there's actually in many countries in Asia, people simply use stored value cards.
Yes.
And the stored value cards are usually the ones that you would be your Oyster in London, which is your transportation card. Or, I mean, in New York, they don't have this. They don't have one actually, because it's not a contactless store value, but there's one called the SmartLink, which is not for the subway, but for the path system. So, and you would use that same similar card in a plane. So you can use your Suica Pasmo, where Suica was a card I was using when I was living in Tokyo, and I would take an ANA flight, and I'll be able to buy stuff with that same stored value card in flight. And now I just read that because you are going to Hong Kong, and I'll probably also go with you, that Hong Kong, the smart card for public transportation, Octopus, is going to be introduced to HK Express, which is one airline, and they will accept that form of payment for.
Octopus card is ubiquitous in Hong Kong. You can pay for it, at McDonald's, at 7-Eleven, as well as just about every form of public transport available.
It's the second biggest contactless smart card system after the one in South Korea.
I believe it, and really got to be one of the oldest as well. Because when I was living there as a teenager, we had them.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to mention it because it's interesting to see how models are still very based on geography, and that in Asia, a lot of people use, and it's increasing. It's not something that is like a legacy. No. In Japan, more and more people are using those like dozens of smart card systems, and they're more and more being accepted at airports and airlines. So it's interesting. It's very interesting that we would not think about it ourselves. I would not pay with my Oyster card.
No.
Anyway.
No.
Still on the Apple Watch, since it was our gadget of the week last week. So we know that American Airlines was one of the launch partners. So they had their app on display at the keynote that Apple made. But since then, we have others. One of which is EasyJet. EasyJet is introducing an Apple Watch app. What do you think about that?
They claimed that they were one of the first low cost, whatever that means, airline to have an Apple Watch app. And it actually answers a question we had last week about whether or not you would be able to get your boarding pass on your watch and use that to go through, because they say in this article that you will get easy access to your passbook boarding pass. Now that's intriguing, because if it means I have it on my watch, then there's value there. There's I don't have to pull my phone out or my actual boarding pass. But this is it's cool, and I think the feedback, the haptic feedback that the watch gives you, where it feels like somebody's tapping you, it does that when you approach the gate, or if anything changes that you need to be aware of, or anything like that, as well as the sort of, you're delayed, that type of thing. So it's cool. I'm waiting for somebody to get more towards what Starwood did, where you're actually opening your hotel door with your watch. In terms of it,
would you like to open the airplane door?
Sure, if they let me fly it around for a while, that'd be great with my Apple Watch. But it's cool, it's nice, I fly EasyJet a lot, so I'm interested to try this out when I inevitably, as you say, get an Apple Watch.
There's one thing though that might particularly that you might find interesting. I don't know if it's a gadget or not. There's in the app there will be also the local currency exchange rate and the weather at destinations. I know it's not something fantastic, but have something like it's a nice add-on to directly know what's the currency.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. That's pushing that type of information to something that's at a glanceable that you can acknowledge and then dismiss is sensible. It's a sensible use of the platform.
Another airline was introducing also probably on April 24th, which is the launch of the Apple. This is the day you're going to be able to buy it, or you will be receiving if you've pre-ordered. Air New Zealand is also launching one. The reason I'm mentioning this one is because it will ping you. So basically, if you're in the airport and you're late getting to the gate, the watch will start actually, doing that kind of feedback you just mentioned and tell you that, hey, you must actually rush to the
Tapping you.
gate.
How funny.
So the rest is usual, flight status. But one other thing they do, if you have access to the lounge, you can order coffee with your Apple Watch.
I'm actually interested to see what Starbucks do with the Apple Watch, because for a coffee company, they're awfully innovative, and they were one of the pioneers of mobile retail and mobile commerce. So I'm actually interested to see what they've done, or will do, I suppose.
And finally, to be fair, because that's the third one that was announced, Emirates is also launching, will be also released on April 24, an Apple Watch app. That's difficult to say. Apple Watch app. That's same, nothing fancy. You cannot order your coffee. It's a companion to the iPhone app. So, the more and more it's interesting, this is what we said last week. It's although, and I know it's unfair, although Android has been with its smartwatches around for much longer, again, the fact that Apple is pushing makes suddenly a lot of airlines in our industry here, and a lot of airlines react. And that's interesting tidbit. We'll see. I'm pretty sure that between now and April 24, we'll see more and more other airlines and probably airports releasing.
Yes.
Apple Watch
I think
apps.
it'll be a lot of that in situ real time stuff that will prove to be so useful.
And it will, coming back to, again, that CETA report, remember it said only 4.6% of passengers were using mobile check-in. Maybe that actually will unlock this number a bit, because
that's amazing.
Already, I think more than 1.5 billion boarding passes are technically available each year on a mobile app, and nobody seems to be using them. So it's strange, right? So I don't. So maybe the fact that you can have that on your wrist will probably maybe unlock this. We don't know. We'll see. It's interesting. But that accounts for a lot of devices. We just mentioned the iPhone. We mentioned an Apple Watch. That same report from CETA mentioned that 97% of the passengers now carry some sort of electronic device on themselves. And there was a bit of a problem with a battery.
There was an incident on a KLM flight 2 days ago. Flight from Amsterdam to Bangkok, where the lithium-ion battery of a passenger's phone, thankfully, in the cabin, caught fire. And what made this all the more dramatic is it was, of course, given the age that we live in, caught on smartphone and posted to YouTube and went viral, of fairly heavy-duty amounts of smoke emanating from this.
Yeah, it's impressive, actually.
This overhead bin. And to KLM's credit, the crew dealt with it decisively and swiftly, and there was no harm, and there was no injury or anything like that. But it does highlight a increasingly pervasive issue of lithium-ion batteries, which are a remarkable feat of engineering and power this society in which we exist. But they occasionally catch fire, and when they're sitting on your desk or even in your pocket, it sucks. But when they're in the cargo hold of an airplane, it can be devastating. And it actually,
it's forbidden.
It is forbidden to have them in the in the check luggage. Yeah,
the car.
It brought down in Dubai a UPS 747. Lithium-ion batteries caught fire in the hold. The pilots were overcome by smoke, and the plane crashed, killing both pilots. And it's
sorry to interrupt. Weren't the early woes with the 787, because when they're also the
Teslas that caught on fire, lithium-ion batteries. Sony recalled millions of lithium-ion batteries because they kept catching on fire. Now we need to look at the scale of this. I mean, there are billions, I'm sure, of lithium-ion batteries out there. And again, in normal situations, if something goes wrong with them, if there's the separation between the two lithium ions actually erodes and they do catch fire, in a normal circumstances, it's not a big deal. But on a plane, when you can't get to the source of the fire because it's in the cargo hold, it's really dangerous. So I'm interested to see if this reignites, sorry.
That
If it reignites an already kind of debate that's at the forefront because of the 787.
Yeah, it's. I mean, if you read when you submitted a piece of news, I just looked at some rules of the passenger rules of what you could board and not in a few airlines. Obviously, I took a look at KLM, so you're not supposed to put any of these batteries in cargo, so in your checked-in baggage, which obviously is maybe sometimes hard for the airline to actually survey. But they say something, and I want to ask you if you do it. They say, if you have a spare battery in the cabin with you, you're supposed to have it packed in the original packaging. And if you no longer have this packaging, you must cover the battery contact points with tape to insulate them and pack each battery in a separate
and
plastic
anybody
bag.
who says they do that is a liar.
Is a liar. Exactly. That's the issue.
Yeah, and I think, you have your phone on you, but I don't know about you, but I have one of those portable recharging batteries that you plug your phone or your iPad into. Same thing, and those are even more prone to issues like that. So I don't know what the solution is.
Cathay policy is interesting because Cathay actually does a tiered policy depending on the amount of wattage, so the amount of power to make it simpler that your battery has. So and they limit, but still,
no one's going to look at who knows what their wattage is. I mean,
that's a thing. Nobody at security has ever asked me. I also carry one of these, actually sometimes even two of these batteries to recharge my phone, iPad, etc. Nobody has ever asked me what those were, and they never actually even looked at the So the only thing I know is that it's true that they are. I've tried sending a battery like that. It was in its original packaging. I tried sending it as a gift to someone, and DHL, I think it was, and I'm not finger pointing here, refused because it said that the airline might just say no because it's in the cargo, and then all etc. etc. What you just. So I mean, we don't know. Nobody has come up with an alternate. I mean, on a large scale, something to replace.
No.
Yet.
I
mean, we wish.
It's alarming. It'll be interesting to see, what safety measures they put in place if they start to get more stringent about that type of thing. I don't know, but it was quite alarming footage to see, and thankfully everything ended safely and happily.
Very quickly, you saw something that is pretty cool. I've done it about a Spitfire.
Yes, submitted by our good friend Greg Annandale. Who is at Greg_A on Twitter, who is a fellow ultra traveler and a very talented photographer and a total aviation nut like the rest of us. He sent us this link to an interactive Spitfire where you have a kind of 3D cockpit that you can look all around 360 degrees, and every single instrument and switch and lever and dial is annotated. So you just click on it and it tells you exactly what it does and what it's supposed to do and how it works. And it's just, you get lost in this thing. It's so immersive, so interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'll put the link. It's really cool. Another visualization like this that Gen Kanai, from a good friend from Tokyo, works in Mozilla, gave me a few weeks ago already, there's a real-time visualization of all flights in the world. So it's not real-time in the sense that it's not actually displaying like Plane Finder or Flight Radar 24, where are the flights, but it displays you a 24-hour visualization of all the flights happening in the world.
Cool.
So it's a globe. It's in 3D. It's really well done. It's a display of technology for something called WebGL. It's a 3D engine, hardware accelerated, but it's really cool. So you should. And talking about Plane Finder and Flight Radar 24, I'll let you do that one.
Thanks. So there is a trend. I mean, it's been going on for years, but recently there's been a lot of them of pilots going up for whatever reason. This one is described as an intrepid pilot. And he went on a flight and sketched out a gigantic penis that covered most of Florida. Which obviously, to someone looking at an airplane, you're never going to see it. But when you go on Flight Radar 24 or FlightAware or somewhere like that, it's very, very obvious what he's doing. And people are being paid $100 an hour to do this, and then the images get sent around. But it's quite. I think it's very funny, but B, it's quite a test of airmanship to be able to do that. I think they have to do quite a lot of planning.
I have no words, but it's correct.
It's so funny.
Absolutely. I was trying to find there have been any other occurrences or something like that. Someone trying to draw anything in the sky, but I couldn't find
remember
any. So
that.
if any of
Yes,
you,
yes. There was the wonderful 787 test flight where they wrote 787.
oh yeah, that's true. Sorry,
That
you're
was a
absolutely right.
great
Yeah.
one.
It reminds me of a friend of mine, it's totally unrelated, but a friend of mine in Tokyo called Joseph Tame runs marathons and runs like very long distances. And he keeps doing this, what he calls the art of running. So he used GPS coordinates.
Cool.
And I think it was Runkeeper. And he's done the Apple logo. He's done a Hello Kitty. I think the Hello Kitty was something like 45 kilometers around Tokyo to draw it. Apple logo was 21 or something. Anyway, it's pretty. But I'm not sure that you can do that a lot in planes because there's way more regulations about where you can actually go with your plane. But I mean, it's fun. Maybe we'll see. Maybe this Intrepid will create a lot of copycats and other people inspired by his antics.
There's an alarming amount of sky penises out there in the last 10 years. Be warned.
Goodness. We both Alex and I are a bit obsessed with the app of the week. We mentioned it, I think, in every single episode until then. So we just let's go with it. That's ITA. Alex,
The ITA Matrix.
what is ITA?
So
Matrix?
ITA is a software company that is a big component of the fare booking architecture. It exists so much below the usual products that we're exposed to, and actually interfaces directly with airline inventory systems to allow that communication between the front end systems and services like Kayak and Google Flight Search that we use and the actual airlines themselves. It was built by some MIT scientists. It's been around for years. It was bought. ITA as a company was bought by Google about 5 or 6 years ago, and the Matrix airfare search has been around as a product for years, but it's one of those things that's quite esoteric. It's quite technical, and has never really been the bastion of the consumer. The people that do use it religiously are the people that have turned the art of frequent flyer miles into a science.
Yeah, correct.
Because it is easily the most publicly available, most powerful publicly available flight search tool by orders of magnitude. What you can do with this thing is staggering. Now, I don't know about you, Paul, but I have really only begun to scratch the surface of what this technology can do.
I mean, it's same here. I mean, we should mention, and I know you mentioned it in our early episodes, you cannot book a flight.
Yes, that's a huge
You only
caveat.
can find the route, and then you still have to either go and try to replicate that on another website, airline website, or even to call the airline, because some of the routes, honestly, and that's my main issue, is that I've played with it, and like you probably haven't even started touching the surface of what I can actually do with it. But then I found these amazing routes, and I cannot replicate them anywhere. And I have to try to call the airline and say, okay, can you do this and this and this? And the person on the other end is like, this guy must be nuts. Why does he want to do that? But that's the only maybe caveat, though. I would say maybe also someone like you and me were going into crazy routes that nobody does anyways.
Yeah, but I'll give you an example of why this is so good, because it is very interesting, and you can find great fares, and it gives you a calendar of available fares. But there are quite a few other sites that do this. But let's say you're flying from London to Hong Kong, and you put those things, and you say you can be flexible. You say, I want to leave on this date, and I'm happy to go for between 3 and 8 nights. So you can be flexible on your search terms, and or very, very specific on where you want to go. But you can then tell it, I only want to fly this airline on this leg, or I only want to fly members of this particular airline alliance on this leg and that leg. So, of course, the mileage runners and the tier point runners who are looking for the lowest available cost per frequent flyer point love this stuff because they can hone it in on this. But this is the feature that I use the most. I can say I search for London to Hong Kong, but also look any airport within 500 miles of London. So basically within an hour and a bit flight, which you could usually get on a low-cost carrier. Now that's where it gets interesting, because all of a sudden you're moving away from the UK's air passenger duty or some weird taxes or anything like that. And I've seen £750 fares drop to below 400, and all you're doing is paying for a £35 flight from London to Dublin or London to Amsterdam and connecting through. That's where it gets so powerful. And I think Google Flights, and again, Google own ITA, are slowly adopting some of that functionality into their already very powerful and impressive Google Flight search. But the Matrix is really where it's at for finding these highly crafted fares from multi-cities to and you can even change the sales city, i.e. which city is the ticket issued in, which can have a huge amount of impact on the taxes that you pay. And you can find some extraordinary, especially as you move into business and first class, the savings can be extraordinary.
Yeah, it's also like a rabbit hole because you start playing with it and like 5 hours later you're still playing with it. I think I had mentioned in an early episode, maybe it was 03, but I'll post a link with us. Somebody had done a cheat sheet so you can have like the basic codes to play with. You can get started, because obviously when you go to that website, it's a bit like, it looks like one of these normal, route searching, flight booking websites, and you maybe not be aware of all the little codes you can use. So I'll post that so you can start playing with it. And we mentioned as well that Hipmunk can replicate parts of these. I'll re-put the link again in the show notes. It's fun.
Google Flights is getting better at being able to replicate it.
Correct.
I was surprised by Expedia was able to get pretty close on fare on a flight that I just searched for, and also Kayak was getting reasonably close. So I think it's just knowing what city pairs to connect and things like that. That's what the Matrix is so good at unveiling. Those other ones I just mentioned, they won't.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else you wanted to mention about ITA? I mean, we could talk for hours.
I think play with it, and there's some great, as Paul says, there's some great how-tos and manuals almost that you need, but it's worth playing around with. My father, who I told him about it one day, and the next day sent me this fare that I didn't think was anywhere close to being possible. It was very impressive. So it does get intuitive the more you play with it.
The only thing we're not sure about is about its future.
Yes.
So Google has seems kind of, at least for the medium term, seems committed, because the last release that there was a lot of bugs that they introduced mistakenly was done last December. So apparently they are still committed to make it better, but it's real that their focus is Google Flights, the more consumer-y one. So we'll see, especially what happens after, I think it's 2016, when they basically, that's the agreement they have with the DOJ, Department of Justice in the US, because when they bought ITA, a lot of people were afraid that Google was taking too much of a big share of the market. So they have limitations about what they can do until 2016. So basically, that's where we'll know, I think it's October 2016, what will happen with Matrix. Will they keep it for people like us, or will they just get rid of it? I really hope so. I really do hope so. Moving on to the topic of the week, a brief view. So it's just, for those who are hearing us and those simply were looking at what happens in civil aviation, you've seen that this huge thing with low-cost carriers on one side, and obviously the new type of carriers like the Gulf Airlines. So for once, we're not going to talk about the Gulf Airlines. We want to talk a little bit about the low-cost. And to exemplify that struggle that a lot of airlines, traditional airlines as we call it, have, I want to take a quick look at how Lufthansa is dealing with it. It's a very good example. Lufthansa, a premium brand in Europe, premium company, very effective. It's a very well seen, and the brand is very well respected. Management is very respected, and still they have a lot of issues to try to, deal with all the low costs that are hitting their market. And I think their story is interesting. I mean, others are doing that. They will come to like Air France KLM, with Transavia and others. I mean, they all trying to find a way to compete with low cost. But I think Lufthansa is. Do you want to say anything, or do you want me to go a little bit to the story?
Yeah, no, go for it. I think this is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, the IATA, just to start, the IATA as forecasted, there will be growth, which is pretty healthy in the airline industry in Europe in 2015, slightly higher than the expected growth of GDP. So meaning that it should be okay. But, and that's interesting, most of the growth should happen in eastern part of Europe. So which is a part which is a better market for low-cost airlines. That's where you see the struggle. I mean, the market is more and more appealing for low-cost structures. So Lufthansa, we mentioned that earlier, had a lot of strikes last year because they're trying to renegotiate all the deals
I've
with
got
their
one going
pilots
on
and their
right now.
staff. Yes, exactly. And the reason why is because what they decided to do, in a nutshell, I'm going to take a lot of shortcuts and cutting corners for the sake of time. They decided to say, okay, we'll stay with a premium product, Lufthansa, that will be the brand. Those flights, especially for long haul, will fly from Munich and Frankfurt, and that's about it. A little bit from Düsseldorf. Basically, these two airports will be our core product, the premium product, the product you've been getting to know. Then they started, and that's already more than 10 years ago, they introduced a first attempt at low cost, which was still called German Wings.
Yeah.
German Wings, so they were trying to do low cost. To make it short, it was slightly better. They got 20% less cost than the traditional Lufthansa. This is basically what the industry agrees on. But it wasn't enough. They did a second attempt, or they're currently doing a second attempt, which is called Eurowings. If you've ever flown Lufthansa, you might have seen before October 2014 an airline called Lufthansa Regional. So it was for the small, very short haul flights from Lufthansa. This has been transformed into Eurowings, which is now a low cost structure. And this is the brand that will take over all the rest that Lufthansa Premium, to make the difference here, will not cater for. And the price structure here is 40% less than Lufthansa. And obviously, this is why they're trying to offload a lot, of course, of the flights, but also to hire people with different pension plans, different rates of salaries. They were renegotiated. So they just did a deal with pilots at Eurowings, I think, for 5 years. So that side seems to be working, although it's starting. But the side of premium is the reason why we still have a lot of the current strikes, for instance. So it's really basically what they're doing is that Lufthansa will have two systems. It's a hub and a network carrier. There's on one side a high quality product, and on the other side a very point-to-point low-cost product. And this is, I think, the way that most traditional airlines are looking to do in Europe, at least.
Yeah, I do. And I think it's interesting because it's a model that has been replicated with quite a lot of success elsewhere. Like you look at Cathay and Dragonair. Dragonair they're not a low cost, but they're a regional, wholly owned subsidiary going into markets that doesn't make sense for an airline like Cathay, who have a long haul oriented fleet, a premium product available, and Dragonair gives them that access to the rest of their home region, and it works fantastically well for them. I think it took them quite a while to kind of, and let's be clear, Dragonair started as an independent company and slowly was sort of bought in piecemeal until it was 100% owned by Cathay by 2005. So it does work and it can work, but I think when you pile on all the labor issues that poor Lufthansa have had to endure forever, it just
you coming back to the report we mentioned too, again, I don't know if it's a report, but the paper that Emirates put, there is one graphic that shows you the labor cost that I quickly mentioned earlier, and that shows you that Lufthansa is basically one of the most expensive airlines in terms of cost, and that they have and this is where the reason the pilots are I think it's the pilots currently are striking is because they have, Germany is known, like Switzerland and a few others, you have a very a lot of emphasis on collective agreements. So you have two American sides, the unions on one, and this is what they've done. They signed a deal between the unions and the company for 10 years, and obviously now the company is basically, because they don't have 10 years to wait, although it's already some years have passed, but they want to renegotiate before term, and of course at the same time they're hiring these pilots with a different structure, which is Eurowings. Right. So that makes them very hitchy about their future and etc. And which I understand, honestly. I mean, it's this is the crux of the matter. How do you, it's easier. It's maybe not the right word, but for companies for startup companies, or even for companies like Ryanair or EasyJet, which we always mention in Europe, because they have started with a different labor and cost structure from the beginning. They don't have to deal with a legacy. So it's a tough one. I hope, for Lufthansa, I hope they succeed, because I think Lufthansa is one of these brands that is one of the most respected in the industry.
Absolutely. And Germanwings is great too. I've flown them many times and I was really impressed with them.
They will actually merge it by the end of this year, the two brands. So German Wings will disappear and will be basically one will call Eurowings. That will be the brand. But and that's interesting because you were telling me about Ryanair going in long haul. They want to go long haul as well with their LCC. I mentioned last week that they will start doing a flight to Dubai.
For
So
99.
they will not. By the way, they will not fly a Dubai airport. They will fly Al Maktoum, which is the other airport, which maybe one day will be one of the biggest in the world, but not
Right.
today. So they are doing. They are attempting to do also a long haul, low cost structure. They are planning Bangkok, Phuket, Punta Cana. So you see more like holiday destinations, but they're starting. So that will be interesting to see if they succeed
I always
here
wonder.
as well.
I mean, I'm sure that they know what they're doing, but I always wonder when you start to cannibalize your own routes. When you're competing directly with your own carrier, I guess you're trying to go for every single end of the market. But gosh, I don't know. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, but at the same time, there are other brands in Germany, like all the other markets have. There's not only EasyJet and Ryanair, which is the one that we keep mentioning because it's probably the biggest one. But if you take Air Berlin, for instance, Air Berlin is, for instance, I think it has a very successful route between, I don't remember now the city, but it goes to Abu Dhabi. And that only reason made that Eurowings decided not to do it because they don't want to compete there. I thought there is clearly competition from all the others that you might not have heard of if you've never traveled to Germany. But there's a heavy competition. It's not easy at all, and I think the entire industry is trying to figure out how they will be able. And this is probably I'm not calling it a model, but it's the example of, I think most of, at least in Europe, the airlines are trying to kind of offload part of the network, maybe for cannibalization. I don't know how it will end up. But I remember having a discussion in a flight with a flight attendant for Air France. I was flying back. I think it was from Buenos Aires. And the guy was telling me the same, was telling me the rumor is that at Air France, they want to keep the premium product for the long haul flights and they want to offload everything else to low cost entity.
Interesting,
so,
isn't it?
I know it's not. I'm not saying that I'm happy about it. I'm saying that a lot of premium passengers have complained that they cannot fly Lufthansa from anywhere else but Frankfurt and Munich.
Which again is like you just introduced another issue.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, this is a topic we'll still be following. One quick question of the week. I invented it because it was fun. I don't know. You would just mention ITA Matrix as the app of the week, finding those amazing fares you can find. And there are a lot of times where you can find what it's called mistake fares. So basically, with either there was a computing error or maybe a human error that creates
fat
a fare.
fingering.
There's some fat finger. Yeah, exactly. So for instance, in a few examples, 2013, there was Delta did a JFK LAX for $47 return. They honored it. Etihad were selling a JFK Abu Dhabi for $180. I don't remember the exact price. They honored it in return.
Wow.
They actually honored it. More recently, South African Airways sold a round-trip business class ticket from Johannesburg to Abu Dhabi for $72. They didn't honor it. And United, that was an example for 2012, did New York to Hong Kong in first class, which price is usually $11,000. They were selling it for $43.
$43.
Yeah, they didn't honor it either. So that was a question. Should airlines honor? Is there anything that you can do if you find one of the mistake flight? Do you think they will be honored? Do you have any take on this, Alex?
Because of the way reservation systems used to be built, once you put a fare out there, you had up to 6 hours before you could change it. And of course, this was legacy architecture, but in the time of the internet. So 6 hours is basically 45 days on the internet. And so people jumped all over them. When I was back in my airline days, we find like business class to Sydney round trip from San Francisco for like $200, and we'd book them. We just book them and then figure out if we were going to take them because we wanted to just jump on it. But morally, I think yes, of course they should honor them. I mean, if you've gone through and you've given them the money and you've completed the transaction and they've given you the confirmation code, for them to go around and go, oh yeah, we made a mistake. It's different than taking up something that's been mispriced at a supermarket and then they scan it and go, oh, wait, this TV is obviously not $35. Something's wrong. Let me go check. You've paid the money. You've walked out of the store with the TV. It's like them knocking on your door saying, we need that TV back, or you need to give us another $500.
Actually, so in the case of the example of South African decided not to honor the tickets, that $72 round trip business class, but they refunded. There were more than 600 people who actually had bought that flight, and they said they were not obligated to provide services for compensation that is erroneously published and commercially unfeasible. I mean, then again, I understand that. I mean, there are some stuff. Some, like I said earlier, some airlines do, because they gracefully understand that they do it. But it's true that the era, they're like a whole industry. There you can find, of course, there's Flyer Talk, which is a very famous forum. But then you have all these deals websites when the people seem to be just looking for that.
They look for anomalies. They write software to look for, greater than.
But the thing is, nowadays with social media, it means that something that you, Alex, might have found back 10 years ago, and you have told a few friends, now goes like viral in the next 5 minutes. Like half of the planet wants to buy that. So that was the example that made me think about it. Was United mistakenly sold a first class fare very cheaply. It was a first class transatlantic ticket for $51. That was in February, so very early, and they ended up not honoring. And what it surfaced is that the Department of Transportation, DOT in the US, is actually very stringent. It says he's actually agreeing with you, Alex. He said, okay, if you sell something, you cannot just renege and say, oh, by the way, now it's more expensive. Yeah. So they say, they have this stance. But in that case, they didn't side with the airline because, that's interesting, because in order to find that fare, you had to go to, and that's the ITA Matrix story, you had to go to, I think it was a Danish website of United, book from there, do a translation. So the DOT said, okay, this was a fare that was not publicized for American customers, thus we're not defending American customers. So that would seemingly seem that if the mistake had been done within US markets, then they would have to honor it. But, and that's the last bit of the story, the same department is now thinking about this new era of social media and this access, and they basically said, to put it simply, they don't want to protect the gamers. Their role is to protect the consumer, but not the gamers. And I think when they say that, is clearly basically people that just look for cheap fares all the time. And they are actually looking into changing the regulation in order to still protect consumers, individuals, but understanding that the nature of the market has changed because of social media. And they are looking into ways of allowing airlines not to honor these type of tickets. It's interesting because I've looked around, and basically the US was one of the only markets where they have such a strong regulation written in law, which is why when you had some mistake fares and an airline didn't want to honor it, there were backdoor settlements with consumers, and or even lawsuits that were settled aside. So whereas they seem to be a little bit like willing to change the stance. We'll see.
Yeah,
interesting.
It is.
So guys, if you want to find one, you buy it first very quickly, but be aware that it might be not honored.
Yeah, don't plan your whole family vacation on it.
Exactly. Final part of the show, Singapore. So actually, Alex and I, we were just discussing this before recording the show. We met in Singapore.
First time, and I'm still trying to figure it out if it's 2009 or 2010. But yeah, Paul and I first met in Singapore.
Yeah, at a conference through a common friend, Dave McClure, that introduced us. He was not there, but he introduced us. I think it was on Twitter, actually.
No, you're right.
Oh, you should meet that guy. You were talking at the conference I was just attending back then. So Singapore Airport it's a fantastic airport. Let's just put that out there first. It has just been named again by Skytrax as the best airport in 2015. It was already named in 2014 and in 2013. Business Traveler magazine has named it the best airport for 26 consecutive years.
I believe it.
So, do you like that airport? I'm sure.
It's the most extraordinary airport in the world. Not only does it work brilliantly, is it intelligently laid out and got all the great amenities, it has 3 movie theaters, one of which is free, and the other plays brand new movies at I think $2 a pop. It has
The swimming pool.
A swimming
you were about
pool.
to say, yes.
It has an amazing transit hotel. It is a hotel built for layovers, not for our podcast.
Yes,
but for
sadly.
And it's for people that are got 6 or 7 hours. It is $11 and you get access to the pool, jacuzzi, shower, towel, a drink.
I should mention that the swimming pool is indeed in that hotel, the Ambassador Transit Hotel. But even if you're not staying at a hotel, you can pay a small price and actually have access to it. You'll have access to the jacuzzi, the swimming pool. You'll have a towel. You have access to showers, obviously. And it'll also give you a drink, non-alcoholic.
Yeah, that's $11. $11.
That's pretty amazing.
It is, and there's a nail and hair salon. There's a nature trail. There's fitness center.
So these things. So on top of T1, so there's currently there are 3 terminals. The 4th one is being remodeled. It was a budget one. It's going to be a T4, but on top of T1 there's a cactus. It's a rooftop. You walk. There's like a real dozens of cactuses, and you can walk around. It's really magnificent. Similar experience on rooftop of Terminal 2. You have sunflowers. Again, you're outside, and you have this huge garden. And then if you have kids, for instance, in T3, which is the newest one, it was built in 2008, you have a butterfly garden. You can go in and you see butterflies all around. There's a lot of interactive displays. It's a great thing to do when you have a layover or if you're early to the airport. It's actually you know what, for Singaporeans, it is sometimes a destination in itself. The airport,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you have an orchid garden in T2 as well. And there's, if you like a little bit more techie stuff, there's an enchanted garden at T2, which is also like these big kind of flowers, but they all made with LEDs and technology. This is an airport you can spend hours in and never get tired of.
And it's also a very, very good airport.
It is. Yes. Actually, what I always found a bit bizarre, it's that you can walk between the 3 terminals since they linked to each other. So sometimes you don't even realize that you move from one terminal to another. You're like, oh, I'm not at T3 anymore. I'm T1 because T1 is in the middle of the 2 others. And so it makes it for a pretty cool experience. Terminal 3 is probably the most breathtaking because there's this green wall. I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know if you've been to, which is this 10,000 plants on a big wall, which is, I think, 300 meters long and 14 meters high, which is really magnificent. It looks like it's really breathtaking to see. And there's a huge amount of daylight, which, let's be honest, T1 doesn't have, because T1 is the oldest one. It's not really that amazing. But another thing I wanted to mention is that there's a T3 they've done, and I don't know if you tried it, the slide.
The 4-story tall slide. Are you kidding?
So even if you buy you can simply go there and buy a ride, but if you buy for 10 Singaporean dollars worth of merchandise and a single ticket in the duty-free shops, you can redeem a ride at that,
which is totally worth it.
Yes, you can. You know what? I thought about you when I read that. I think you cannot do more than 10 rides.
That's just ridiculous.
Per day, because otherwise some people are getting addicted to it.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I love that airport.
And if really you don't like any of this stuff, and I've done it once, I was on a layovers for a few hours. I didn't want to sleep. I'd done all this stuff. Some people call me blasé, but you can have free city tours.
Yeah, if you're there for more than 4 hours.
Yeah, you can just go to a booth and they take you in a bus and you go and you do a little tour of Singapore because the airport is not very far from the city. So it's pretty cool. It's really, and it's free. It's totally free.
The perfect airport.
Which, by the way, talking about free, so Wi-Fi is free, but Wi-Fi is actually free citywide in Singapore. You have wireless at SG. You just find that thing, and you on your Wi-Fi settings, and it will send you a text back and with a code, and then you have 24-hour access to free Wi-Fi. It's just, the city is just, most people who have never been there have maybe the bad image about what Singapore is. Singapore is really a very well thought out city, and the airport represents that. Really, they will expand it airport, so they will if you remember. So you have Alex, you have T1, T2, T3, which makes some kind of a U shape, Right in the middle, they're building something called a Jewel, which will be some kind of huge shopping center,
transit
which will link
area.
everything together. It will be massive. The pictures look completely crazy. And they're building Terminal 4. And then they just released, I think it was 5 days ago, the final concept plans for T5, which will take over the airbase. When you land at Singapore, you can see on the side the airbase, the military airbase. So it will take over the airbase. There will be one more runway and a huge terminal, which it will be the side of all the current terminals together.
Amazing,
so they're really expanding. So when we talk about Gulf Airlines having a model, this is exactly the same model. They really want to do that model of people, stop and go. It's a destination airport, but it's at the same time it's a transit airport. It's
a wonderful airport, state of the art in every way.
Well, and we probably will be there in a few months
May.
as well. So we're really looking forward to that. Anything else you wanted to add?
No,
about
I love it. It's one of the few airports in the world I look forward to going to.
Oh yeah, clearly 26 years in a row. We'll next make it 27th year. On that bombshell, let's see each other next week. We're not exactly sure yet about which day because Alex will be traveling to the US. So guys, if you listen to us, we try to make the show usually on Mondays, sometimes on Tuesday, like today. Next we'll might be a little bit off depending on the travel plans of Alex.
Keep an eye on Twitter and Facebook, and we'll keep you up to date.
Exactly. And on that,
good night.
Alex. Bye.
On behalf of Layovers and the entire crew, we'd like to thank you for joining us on this podcast, and we're looking forward to seeing you on board again next week. Flight attendants, please prepare for landing.